This story is inspired by real-life situations and includes fictional elements for entertainment. Not recommended for viewers under 18.
Some sentences destroy a marriage. Not screaming, not betrayal. Just one sentence spoken without thinking. On a quiet Thursday night in Seattle, Adrian Walker stood in his own living room while the woman he loved looked at him with a cold expression and said, "You're not my children's father." 8 words. 8 years of love suddenly felt like a mistake. And what Adrian did next was something Lauren Bennett never expected. The rain had started just after sunset. Seattle rain was different from storms in other cities. It rarely arrived with thunder or drama. Instead, it slipped quietly into the night, soaking streets and rooftops with a slow persistence that made the world feel smaller. Inside the Walker house, the kitchen lights cast a warm glow over the wooden table where dinner had ended an hour earlier. Plates still sat in the sink. A half-finished glass of red wine rested beside Lauren Bennett's elbow. Adrian Walker stood near the counter, his arms crossed, watching the tension building in the room like pressure behind glass. Across the living room, 12-year-old Chloe sat on the couch, staring at her phone. Her younger sister Mia was on the floor with a tablet, pretending not to listen. But children always listened. "Chloe has a math test tomorrow," Adrian said calmly. Lauren sighed, rubbing her temple. "I know. Then maybe she shouldn't still be on social media." Chloe groaned quietly. Lauren's eyes hardened. "Adrian, she already finished the homework." "That's not the point." "Oh, really?" Lauren leaned back in the chair. "Then what is the point?" Adrian hesitated. The argument had started small, just another conversation about rules, homework, bedtime. Things normal parents discussed every day. Except Adrian wasn't technically a parent, not by blood. But for 8 years he had acted like one. He drove the girls to school, helped with science projects, sat through piano recitals and soccer practices. He had been there for fevers, nightmares, and broken friendships. And he had done it willingly. Because loving Lauren meant loving her daughters. "I'm just saying," Adrian continued carefully, "they need structure." Lauren laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Yes," her voice sharpened. "They're kids, Adrian, and kids need boundaries." For a moment, the room fell quiet, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Chloe's fingers paused on her phone. Lauren leaned forward. "Why do you always make everything a big deal?" "I don't." "You do." Adrian felt frustration rising in his chest. He had spent years trying to keep peace in this house, choosing patience over pride, silence over conflict. But lately something had changed. Lauren had grown distant. Late meetings, locked phone screens, short answers. A quiet wall had formed between them. "I'm not trying to start a fight," Adrian said. "But you always do. That's not fair." Lauren's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "You're acting like some strict father figure." Adrian blinked. "Because someone has to." The words hung in the air, and that was when Lauren said it. Cold, sharp, effortless. "You're not my children's father." The room went completely silent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Adrian felt the sentence hit him before he fully understood it. Lauren crossed her arms. "Don't act like you are." Chloe slowly looked up from her phone. Mia stared at the floor. Adrian didn't move. For a moment he simply stood there, trying to process what had just happened. 8 years. 8 birthdays. 8 Christmas mornings. And suddenly, none of it mattered. Lauren exhaled like she had simply stated a fact. "You don't get to control them." Adrian's voice came out quieter than he expected. "I never tried to control them. You try to parent them. Because they live in this house." Lauren shook her head. "No, Adrian, they live in my house." The words felt heavier this time. Something inside him shifted. Not anger. Something colder. Understanding. Across the room, Chloe whispered softly, "Mom." But Lauren ignored her. Adrian looked around the kitchen. The refrigerator covered in school drawings. The soccer trophy on the shelf. The family photos from vacations. For years he had believed those pictures meant something. Now they look like evidence from a different life. He nodded slowly. "Okay." Lauren frowned. "What does that mean?" Adrian walked past her toward the hallway. "It means you are right." She looked confused. "Where are you going?" "To get some air." "You're being dramatic again." But Adrian didn't answer. He entered the bedroom quietly, opened the closet, pulled out a small travel bag. He didn't pack much, just a few shirts, his laptop, the phone charger. The ordinary pieces of a life suddenly collapsing. When he returned to the living room, Lauren stared at the bag. "Seriously?" Adrian slipped on his jacket. "You said I'm not thought of this." "That's not what I meant." He looked at her for a long moment. For the first time that night, there was no anger in his expression, only clarity. "No," Adrian said softly. "That's exactly what you meant." Chloe stood up. "Adrian, are you leaving?" The question caught in the air. Adrian hesitated. He looked at her, then at Mia. Two girls who had once run into his arms after school. Two girls he had tucked into bed 1,000 nights. "I'll see you soon," he said gently. Lauren scoffed. "You'll be back tomorrow." Adrian opened the front door. Cold rain drifted into the hallway. For a second he paused on the threshold, then he stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Lauren had no idea that this time Adrian Walker wasn't coming back. Seattle after midnight felt like a different city. The streets were quieter, the traffic lights blinking yellow over empty intersections, rain reflecting the glow of street lamps across wet asphalt. Adrian Walker drove without a clear destination, the windshield wiper sweeping rhythmically across the glass like a slow metronome, marking the end of something he had once believed would last forever. He didn't turn on the radio. Silence felt more honest. Lauren's words kept echoing in his mind. "You're not my children's father." He had replayed arguments in his head before every married person did. But this was different. This sentence didn't feel like anger. It felt like a truth Lauren had been holding back for years, finally spoken out loud. Adrian tightened his whip on the steering wheel. For 8 years he had convinced himself that patience could fix anything, that loyalty would eventually be recognized, that love, when given consistently enough, would return the same way. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking whether he was being loved back. The car stopped at a red light near the waterfront. Across the street, the dark shape of Elliott Bay stretched into the distance, the water barely visible beneath the mist. Adrian pulled into a small parking area and shut off the engine. Rain tapped softly against the roof. For a long moment he just sat there, breathing slowly, staring at the water. He thought about the first time he met Lauren. It had been at a charity fundraiser downtown. She had been standing near the bar, wearing a dark green dress and laughing at something one of her co-workers said. Adrian remembered noticing how confident she looked, how she seemed completely comfortable in a crowded room. He had admired that. At the time, he didn't mind that she had 2 young daughters. If anything, it made her seem stronger, more real than the women he had dated before. Lauren had warned him early. "I'm not looking for another father for my kids," she told him during their 3rd date. Adrian had smiled. "I'm not trying to replace anyone." He meant it. The girls already had a father somewhere in California who occasionally sent birthday cards but rarely visited. Adrian never tried to compete with that ghost. He simply showed up. Soccer practices, school pickups, Saturday pancakes, small things that slowly became routine. And somewhere during those routines, he had stopped noticing that Lauren rarely thanked him. A pair of headlights passed along the road, pulling Adrian back into the present. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Lauren. He stared at the screen while it rang. Then it stopped. The text appeared seconds later. "Lauren, are you seriously still out?" Adrian didn't respond. Another message arrived. "Stop being childish." He exhaled slowly. Childish. The word felt strangely distant, like it belonged to a different conversation. He turned the phone face down. Across the bay, a ferry horn sounded through the fog. Adrian realized something uncomfortable in that moment. He wasn't angry, not the way he expected to be. Instead, there was a hollow calm spreading through his chest, a realization. Lauren hadn't broken something tonight. She had simply revealed that it had never truly existed. Back at the house, Lauren Bennett paced the living room with her phone in her hand. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. Chloe sat curled in the corner of the couch, watching her carefully. Mia had already gone upstairs. Lauren typed another message. "Are you coming home or not?" She waited. Nothing. Lauren tossed the phone onto the table. "He's being dramatic," she said, mostly to herself. Chloe spoke quietly. "You hurt his feelings." Lauren turned toward her. "Oh, please, you did. It was an argument. You said he's not our father." Lauren rubbed her forehead. "Because he isn't." Chloe looked down at her hands. The silence that followed felt heavier than Lauren expected. She picked up her wine glass and took a long sip. "He'll come back tomorrow," she said. "He always does." Chloe didn't answer. Morning arrived grey and cold. Adrian had slept in his car for 2 hours before finally checking into a small hotel near downtown. It wasn't comfortable, but it was quiet. When he woke up, sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then the memory returned. The kitchen. Lauren's voice. That sentence. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed and checked his phone. 4 missed calls, 3 texts, all from Lauren. "Are you done with this yet? The girls have school. You're overreacting." He read them without emotion. Then he set the phone down. He showered, shaved, dressed in the same calm routine he had followed every weekday for years. But when he left the hotel room, he didn't drive home. Instead, he went to the office. The glass building overlooking Lake Union felt oddly comforting. Work had always been the one place where things made sense. Deadlines, projects, solutions. People respected competence there. No one questioned whether he belonged. His colleague Marcus Hill noticed him first. Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall with a puzzled expression. "Damn, you look like you slept in a parking lot." Adrian gave a faint smile. "Close. Everything okay?" Adrian considered the question. "Define okay." Marcus studied him for a moment. "Marriage trouble?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "Maybe marriage clarity." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That sounds worse." Adrian nodded slightly. "Probably is." Meanwhile, Lauren waited. That evening she cooked dinner like nothing had happened. Chloe and Mia sat at the table quietly. Lauren checked her phone every few minutes. Still nothing. By the third day, her irritation had turned into something sharper. "How long is he planning to drag this out?" she complained while scrolling through emails. Chloe spoke carefully. "Maybe he's really upset." Lauren laughed dryly. Over one sentence? Chloe didn't respond, because deep down she knew the truth Lauren refused to see. That sentence hadn't been just words. It had been a door closing, and Adrian had walked through it. 1 week passed, then 2. Adrian never returned, and slowly the silence he left behind began revealing something Lauren had ignored for years. Without Adrian, the house felt strangely unstable. School schedules became chaotic. Groceries ran out. Mia forgot her soccer uniform twice. Chloe stopped talking during dinner. Lauren began realizing something uncomfortable. Adrian had been holding the entire structure of their lives together in ways she had never noticed. But by the time she truly understood that, Adrian Walker was already building a different life, somewhere far away from the house he once called home. The first thing that disappeared after Adrian left was the rhythm of the house. It wasn't something Lauren Bennett noticed immediately. At first, she believed the silence was temporary, like a small crack in glass that could be ignored if you didn't stare at it too closely. But rhythm, once broken, rarely returns on its own. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky hanging low over Seattle, and Lauren rushed to the kitchen with the impatient energy of someone already running late. "Chloe, your backpack," she called. "I have it." "Mia, shoes." "I'm looking." Lauren opened the refrigerator and frowned. There was almost nothing inside. Just a half-empty milk carton, a few eggs, and an unopened container of hummus Adrian had bought the week before. She stared at it for a moment. For years, she had never thought about groceries. They had simply appeared. Adrian always stopped by the store on Thursdays after work. Lauren grabbed a protein bar from the cabinet and tossed it toward Mia. "Breakfast." Mia caught it with a confused expression. "Just this? We're late." Chloe watched quietly from the table. She noticed everything now. The way her mother moved faster, more impatiently. The way the house felt colder in the mornings. The way Adrian's chair at the table remained empty. No one sat there anymore. Lauren grabbed her car keys. "Let's go." The drive to school felt strangely quiet. Adrian used to drive them most mornings. He played old rock songs on the radio and sometimes quizzed Mia on multiplication tables while Chloe rolled her eyes in the back seat. Lauren drove differently, faster, more distracted. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She glanced down at the screen. Greg Holloway. A small smile touched her lips before she could stop it. Chloe noticed. Lauren answered using the car's Bluetooth. "Morning." Greg's voice filled the car, smooth and relaxed. "Hey, beautiful." Lauren lowered the volume slightly. "I'm driving." "I figured you're up early." Conference call got cancelled. Chloe looked out the window. Mia stared at her sneakers. Greg continued. "So, dinner tonight?" Lauren hesitated for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Maybe." Chloe turned her head slightly, just enough to hear. Greg chuckled softly. "You always say maybe. That's because you're persistent. Someone has to be." Lauren glanced at her daughters in the rearview mirror. "We'll talk later." She ended the call quickly. The car filled with silence again. Chloe spoke after a few seconds. "Was that Greg?" Lauren's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Yes." "From your office?" "Yes." Chloe nodded slowly. She had met Greg once at a company barbecue. He had laughed loudly and talked too much. Adrian had seemed uncomfortable around him. At the time, Chloe didn't understand why. Now, she wondered. Meanwhile, Adrian Walker sat inside a quiet coffee shop near Lake Union. The place smelled like roasted beans and warm bread. Outside, the water rippled under a pale winter sun. His laptop was open in front of him, but he wasn't working. Instead, he stared at an email draft he had rewritten 3 times. Subject, apartment lease application. It felt strange typing those words. For 8 years he had lived in the same house, the same bedroom, the same morning routines. Now he was searching rental listings during lunch breaks like someone starting life over. Marcus sat across from him with a sandwich. "You're serious about this?" Adrian glanced up. "About what?" "Moving out permanently." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I already did." "That's not what I mean." Marcus lowered his voice. "Most people storm out, then they go home." Adrian stared out the window toward the lake. I didn't storm out. No. Marcus studied him carefully. You walked away. Adrian nodded. There was a difference. Storming out meant anger. Walking away meant understanding. Marcus took a bite of his sandwich. So what now? Adrian thought about that question often these days. What came after living the life you had built? I start over, he said simply. Marcus whistled softly. 8 years is a long time to erase. Adrian shook his head. I'm not erasing it. Then what? He watched the boat move slowly across the lake. I'm accepting it. Back at the house, Lauren tried to convince herself everything was still under control. She ordered groceries online. She scheduled Mia's soccer practice. She even attempted cooking dinner that evening. But the kitchen felt unfamiliar. She burned the chicken. The smoke alarm went off. Mia covered her ears. Chloe opened the windows. Lauren slammed the oven door shut. Okay, she said sharply. Pizza. They sat around the table, eating from cardboard boxes. No one talked much. Finally, Mia asked the question both girls had been thinking. Is Adrian coming back? Lauren swallowed a bite of pizza. Of course. When? Soon. Chloe looked at her carefully. Did you talk to him? Lauren hesitated. Not recently. Why not? Because he's being stubborn. Chloe lowered her gaze. She wanted to say something else, something more honest, but she stayed quiet. Later that night, Lauren stood alone in the living room. The house felt larger now, too quiet. Her phone buzzed again. Greg. She answered this time. You disappeared earlier, he said. I was busy. With the kids? Yes. A pause followed. Greg spoke more softly. You could come over tonight. Lauren walked toward the window. Rain had started again outside. I shouldn't. Why? She looked around the empty room. Adrian's jacket still hung near the door. His coffee mug still sat beside the sink. Things are complicated right now. Greg laughed lightly. They've always been complicated. Lauren didn't answer. Greg lowered his voice. Come on, Lauren. Another silence filled the room. Finally, she said, maybe tomorrow. Upstairs, Chloe sat on her bed, staring at her phone. She opened Adrian's contact. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she typed, Chloe, hi. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she pressed send. Across the city, Adrian's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter of his temporary apartment. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time since leaving the house, his expression softened. The life Adrian had left behind was beginning to crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, like a foundation shifting beneath a house that once looked perfectly stable, and none of them yet understood how deep those cracks would go. 3 weeks after leaving the house, Adrian Walker finally started waking up in the middle of the night. The first days had been restless. His body still expected familiar sounds, the creak of the staircase, Mia's occasional footsteps when she snuck downstairs for water, Chloe's music drifting faintly from behind her bedroom door. Instead, his new apartment offered only silence. At first the quiet felt unnatural. Now it felt honest. The apartment itself was modest, a one-bedroom unit overlooking a narrow street not far from Lake Union. The furniture was minimal, most of it temporary. A grey couch, a small dining table, a bookshelf that held more empty space than books. But the place had something Adrian hadn't felt in months. Clarity. On a Saturday morning, pale sunlight slipped through the large window while Adrian stood in the kitchen grinding coffee beans. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. He poured hot water slowly into the French press and watched the steam rise. This had once been his weekend ritual before marriage. Slow mornings, strong coffee, long walks by the water. Somewhere along the way, those small routines had disappeared. Not suddenly, just gradually replaced by school schedules, grocery lists, and quiet compromises he never thought twice about making. Adrian carried the mug to the window. Outside, a jogger passed along the sidewalk, her breath visible in the cold air. He took a sip of coffee and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not happiness, but relief. His phone buzzed on the table behind him. A message from Chloe. Chloe, did you move somewhere new? Adrian stared at the screen for a moment. Then he typed back. Adrian. Yeah, just a small place. A few seconds passed. Another message appeared. Is it nice? Adrian looked around the quiet apartment. Yes, he murmured to himself. Then he typed the same word. Adrian. It's peaceful. 3 dots appeared on the screen as Chloe typed, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, the message arrived. Mom says you're just taking space. Adrian exhaled slowly. He had expected that. Adults often simplified complicated truths for children. Adrian. Sometimes, space helps people understand things. A long pause followed. Then Chloe replied. I miss when you made pancakes. Adrian smiled faintly. The kind of small, sad smile that came from remembering something simple and good. Me too, he wrote. Later that afternoon, Adrian sat in a downtown cafe reviewing project reports on his laptop. Work had become his anchor. Long meetings, strategic planning sessions, late-night emails, the structure of it helped quiet his thoughts. Across the cafe, someone dropped a stack of papers. They scattered across the floor near his table. Adrian instinctively stood to help gather them. "Sorry," the woman said with a small laugh. "Gravity has a personal grudge against me." She had dark hair pulled into a loose knot and sharp, intelligent eyes behind thin glasses. "No problem," Adrian said, handing her the papers. He noticed the top document carried a legal letterhead. "Busy day?" he asked casually. "Always." She slid into the chair at the table beside his. "I'm Elena. Adrian. Elena Rivera." He nodded politely. The name sounded familiar. "You're an attorney?" "Civil rights law," she said. "That explains the paperwork." She smiled slightly. "And the constant caffeine addiction." Adrian gestured toward her coffee. "Occupational hazard?" "Exactly." They worked quietly for a few minutes, but Elena eventually glanced up from her laptop. "You've been staring at the same spreadsheet for 10 minutes. Adrian blinked. Was it that obvious? "Only if you're trained to notice people avoiding their thoughts." He raised an eyebrow. "Law school teaches that?" "Life does." She studied him for a moment. "Divorce?" Adrian let out a small breath. "Separation." "Recent?" "Very." Elena leaned back in her chair. "You look like someone who spent a long time trying to make something work." Adrian looked at her curiously. "How can you tell?" She shrugged. "Because you're not angry." He thought about that. She was right. Anger would have been easier. "Anger means you believe something was stolen from you," Elena continued. "You look more like someone who realized he gave something away voluntarily." The words landed quietly between them. Adrian looked down at his coffee. "That's accurate." Elena nodded. "People stay in bad relationships for a lot of reasons. Love, sometimes." She tilted her head slightly. "But more often?" Adrian waited. "Because they forget what respect is supposed to feel like." Adrian didn't respond immediately, but something in his chest shifted again. Across the city, Lauren Bennett stood inside the marketing office where she had worked for 6 years. Glass walls reflected the busy energy of the open workspace, but whispers moved through the room like quiet currents. Lauren noticed them. 2 co-workers lowered their voices when she walked past. Another glanced quickly away. She felt irritation rising. Finally, she approached the break room where her colleague Jenna stood pouring coffee. "What's going on?" Lauren asked. Jenna looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Lauren crossed her arms. "People are talking." Jenna hesitated. Well, what?" Jenna sighed quietly. "It's about Greg." Lauren felt a small knot tighten in her stomach. "What about him?" "People noticed you two living together last week." "That's none of their business." Jenna nodded. "I agree." A pause followed. "But Greg also left with someone else last night." Lauren's expression hardened. "Excuse me?" Jenna shrugged awkwardly. "Just office gossip." Lauren walked out without another word. Her heels struck sharply against the hallway floor. Inside her office, she closed the door and pulled out her phone. Greg answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Lauren, were you out last night?" Greg chuckled lightly. "Is this an interrogation?" "Just answer the question." He paused. "Yeah, drinks with a client." Lauren stared at the glass wall of her office. She could see co-workers moving outside, pretending not to look in. "Right," she said quietly. Greg's voice softened. "You sound tense." "I'm fine. Want to come over tonight?" Lauren hesitated. Something about the invitation suddenly felt different. Less exciting. More uncertain. "I'll think about it," she said. But when she ended the call, an uncomfortable thought lingered in her mind. For the first time since Adrian left, Lauren wondered if the life she thought she wanted was actually beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, Adrian walked along the lakefront later that evening. Cold wind rippled across the dark water. He thought about Elena's words. People forget what respect is supposed to feel like. For years he had believed patience was the same thing as love, but now he began to see the difference. And somewhere in the quiet distance of the city lights, Adrian Walker slowly started remembering who he had been before he learned to accept less. Spring arrived slowly in Seattle. Gray clouds still lingered over the city most mornings, but the air carried a faint warmth that hinted at change. Trees along the sidewalks began showing the first signs of green again. For Adrian Walker, the new season felt symbolic. His routines had settled into something steady. Morning runs along the lake, coffee at the same quiet cafe, long hours at work, evenings spent reading or walking through the city instead of sitting in front of a television, in a house that no longer felt like his. Life had become smaller, but also clearer. One Thursday afternoon, Adrian sat at a conference table reviewing project proposals when his phone vibrated softly beside his notebook. He glanced at the screen. Chloe. The name immediately put his attention away from the conversation around him. He let the phone ring once, twice. Then he stepped out into the hallway and answered. Hey. For a moment, only quiet breathing came through the line. Then Chloe spoke. Hi. Her voice sounded uncertain, like someone testing unfamiliar ground. Adrian leaned against the wall. How are you? I'm okay. Another pause. How's school? He asked. Fine. The conversation drifted awkwardly between them, neither quite sure where to begin. Finally, Chloe asked a question that had been building inside her for weeks. Are you coming back? Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He had expected this, but that didn't make answering easier. I don't think so. Silence followed. In the distance, Adrian could hear the faint noise of students talking near Chloe's schoolyard. Did you and Mom break up? She asked quietly. Adrian chose his words carefully. Your mom and I realized we want different things. Chloe absorbed the answer slowly. Then she said something that surprised him. Mom has been seeing Greg a lot. Adrian didn't respond, not because he was shocked, but because hearing it from Chloe made the truth heavier. She says it's just work, Chloe continued, but he comes over sometimes. Adrian exhaled slowly. Chloe, I'm not stupid. Her voice sharpened slightly. I know what it looks like. Adrian didn't argue. Children often understood more than adults believed. What do you think about it? He asked gently. Chloe hesitated. I think things were different when you lived here. The words carried a quiet honesty that made Adrian's chest tighten. What do you mean? She took a moment before answering. It felt like we were a family. Across the city, Lauren Bennett sat at a restaurant bar downtown, stirring ice in a half-finished cocktail. Greg Holloway sat beside her, relaxed and confident as always. He wore the same easy smile that had once felt exciting. Now, Lauren noticed things she had ignored before. The way he checked his phone constantly. The way his attention drifted during conversations. The way he avoided serious questions. You've been quiet tonight, Greg said. Lauren shrugged. Just tired. Work? Life. Greg laughed softly. You think too much. Lauren turned toward him. Do I? Yeah. He took a sip of his drink. Everything doesn't have to be complicated. Lauren studied his face carefully. For months she had believed Greg represented something exciting. Freedom, adventure, a life not defined by routine. But now she wondered if she had confused excitement with escape. Across the restaurant, two women at another table glanced toward them. They whispered to each other. Lauren noticed. People are staring, she said. Greg shrugged. So? So it's awkward. Why? Lauren leaned closer. Because I'm technically still married. Greg chuckled. That never seemed to bother you before. The words stung more than she expected. Lower your voice, she said sharply. Greg raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax. Lauren turned away from him and stared out the window. Rain slid slowly down the glass. For the first time, the evening felt uncomfortable. The tension followed Lauren home. Chloe was sitting at the dining table when Lauren walked to the door. Textbooks spread around her. Hi, Lauren said casually. Chloe didn't look up. Hi. Lauren dropped her purse on the counter. Where's Mia? Upstairs. Homework? Yes. Lauren opened the refrigerator and found again. Empty shelves. She sighed. I'll order takeout. Chloe finally looked up. Did you go out with Greg? Lauren froze slightly. That's none of your business. Chloe held her gaze. He's here a lot. Lauren closed the refrigerator door. We work together. You also go to dinner together. Lauren's patience snapped. Chloe! Her tone carried a warning. But Chloe didn't back down. Did you and Adrian break up because of him? The question landed like a stone in the room. Lauren stared at her daughter. That is not appropriate. Chloe's voice trembled slightly, but she continued. You said Adrian wasn't our father. Lauren looked away. That's true, but he was the only one who acted like it. The sentence hit harder than Lauren expected. For a moment she couldn't speak. Chloe gathered her book slowly. I'm going to my room. Lauren stood alone in the kitchen after she left. The house felt colder than usual. Later that night, Lauren opened her phone and scrolled through social media. A photo appeared in her feed. Someone had posted pictures from the restaurant earlier that evening. In the background of one image, she and Greg sat at the bar. The caption read, Seattle nice with friends. But the comments below were less subtle. Isn't she married? Office romance getting bold. Poor husband. Lauren's stomach tightened. The life she had carefully curated, the perfect family image, the respectable career, the stable home, was beginning to fracture in public. and there was nothing she could do to stop the whispers now. Across town, Adrian sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights reflect on the water. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Chloe. "Can I visit your new place sometime?" Adrian read the text slowly, then he smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, the word family didn't feel entirely lost. He typed back, "Anytime." But somewhere else in the city, rumors continued spreading, and the quiet cracks in Lauren's carefully constructed life were no longer private. They were becoming visible to everyone. The Saturday morning sky above Seattle was pale and quiet. Spring had begun softening the edges of the city. Cherry blossoms along the sidewalks had started blooming, scattering small pink petals across wet pavement after the night's rain. Adrian Walker stood near the railing of a small park overlooking Lake Union, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He checked his watch. 10:15 a.m. Chloe's message the night before had been simple. "Can I see you tomorrow? Just us?" Adrian hadn't asked questions. Something in the way she wrote it made him understand that she needed a conversation more than explanations. A few minutes later, he spotted her walking across the grass toward him. She wore a gray hoodie and jeans, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. The wind pushed strands of her dark hair across her face. For a moment, Adrian felt something tighten in his chest. She had grown taller. Children always seem to change faster once you stop seeing them every day. "Hey," he said gently. Chloe slowed as she reached him. "Hi." He handed her one of the cups. "Hot chocolate." Her eyes brightened slightly. "You remembered?" "Of course." They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the water. Boats moved slowly across the lake, their engines humming quietly in the distance. For a while, neither of them spoke. Chloe held the cup with both hands, watching steam rise from the top. Adrian waited. He had learned long ago that children often needed silence before they could say what mattered. Finally, Chloe spoke. "The apartment is nice. You saw it?" She nodded. "From the street when Mom drove by last week." Adrian smiled faintly. "Creeping on my building already?" Chloe shrugged. "I was curious." The small attempt at humor faded quickly. She stared at the water again. "Things are weird at home." Adrian's voice stayed calm. "How so?" Chloe hesitated. "Mom and Greg argue a lot." The name didn't surprise him anymore. "He comes over almost every night," she continued, "but sometimes they fight." Adrian didn't comment. Children should never feel responsible for explaining adult mistakes. Chloe kicked lightly at the gravel near the bench. "Everything feels different." Adrian looked at her. "In what way?" She struggled for the right words. "It's like the house doesn't work anymore." The description was so simple that it struck him harder than a detailed explanation would have. "What do you mean?" Chloe took a slow breath. "When you lived there, things made sense." She looked down at the cup in her hands. "You woke us up for school, you made breakfast, you reminded Mom about stuff she forgot." Adrian listened quietly. "Now everyone is just doing their own thing," she said. Her voice softened. "Sometimes Mom doesn't come home until late." Adrian felt a small weight settle in his chest. "Do you and Mia talk about it?" Chloe nodded. "Mia asked where you are. What do you tell her?" Chloe looked at him directly. "That you didn't leave us." Adrian blinked. "That's what you believe?" "Yes. Why?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because if you wanted to leave us, you would have done it years ago." The honesty of the statement made his throat tighten. Chloe stared out at the water again. "I know you're not our real dad." The words hung in the air between them. Adrian waited. "But you were the only one who acted like one." The sentence landed quietly, and somehow it hurt more than Lauren's words ever had. Because Chloe wasn't angry. She was simply telling the truth. Adrian rubbed his hands together slowly, feeling the warmth of the cup fading. "I tried my best," he said softly. "I know. Sometimes adults mess things up," he added. Chloe shook her head. "You didn't mess it up." Adrian looked at her. "You can't know that." "Yes, I can." Her voice carried a quiet certainty. "Mom said you overreacted." Adrian smiled faintly. She would say that. Chloe studied his face. "Did she hurt you?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about lying, about protecting her from the truth. But Chloe had already shown she understood more than most adults gave her credit for. "A little," he admitted. Chloe nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something she had already suspected. "I told her she shouldn't have said that." "What did she say?" "That it was just a sentence." Adrian stared at the lake. A breeze rippled across the water. "Sometimes sentences matter more than people realize," he said quietly. Chloe wrapped her arms around her knees. "Mom thinks you'll come back." Adrian didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Do you?" She considered the question carefully. "No." "Why not?" "Because you look different." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Happier." The observation surprised him. He hadn't thought of himself that way. I'm not happier, he said, just calmer. Chloe nodded. That's what I mean. They sat in silence for another moment. Then Chloe asked the question she had clearly been holding inside. Are you going to forget about us? Adrian turned toward her immediately. Never. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Even if you start a new life? Yes. Even if you meet someone else? Adrian thought about Elena briefly, about their quiet conversations at the cafe, about how she had made him think differently about his past. Yes, he said. Chloe nodded slowly. Then she said something that made Adrian's chest ache. You were the only stable thing in my life. The words came out softly, but they carried years of hidden truth. Adrian looked at her carefully. He understood what she meant. Lauren had always been strong, confident, ambitious, but also unpredictable. Her moods shifted quickly. Her priorities changed with circumstances. Adrian had been the opposite. Steady, patient, present. Chloe wiped her eyes quickly. I just wanted you to know that. Adrian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Thank you for telling me. She gave a small smile. You're still coming to my science fair next month. It wasn't a question. Adrian laughed quietly. I wouldn't miss it. Chloe stood up, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. I should go before Mom notices I'm gone. Adrian stood too. They hugged briefly. It was awkward in the way hugs between growing children and adults sometimes were, but it was sincere. As Chloe walked away across the park, Adrian remained near the bench watching her disappear down the path. Her words echoed in his mind. You were the only stable thing in my life. For years he had believed stability was invisible. That quiet responsibility went unnoticed. Now he realized something different. The people who truly needed it always noticed, even when adults pretended not to. Adrian looked out at the lake again. The truth was complicated. He still cared about Chloe and Mia. He probably always would. But loving them didn't mean returning to a life that had slowly erased him. Sometimes responsibility meant staying, but sometimes it meant knowing when to let go. And Adrian Walker was finally learning the difference. The beginning of the end didn't arrive with a dramatic fight. It came quietly, almost casually, like most truths that people spend too long trying to avoid. 3 months after Adrian Walker left the house, Lauren Bennett stood in Greg Holloway's apartment kitchen, watching him pour whiskey into 2 glasses. The place was modern and stylish sleek furniture, large windows overlooking downtown Seattle, expensive artwork hung in calculated symmetry. At first Lauren had loved coming here. It had felt exciting, different, free from the routines that once defined her life. Now the apartment felt strangely temporary, like a hotel room someone had simply decided to live in. Greg handed her a glass. You look tense, he said. Lauren took a sip. I had a long day. Marketing crisis again? Something like that. Greg leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone while he spoke. You worry too much. Lauren studied him quietly. He said that often, usually when she tried to talk about anything serious. Outside the windows, rain slid slowly down the glass. Seattle rain again. Always quiet, always patient. Finally, Lauren said the thing she had been thinking about for weeks. Have you ever thought about something more permanent? Greg looked up. What do you mean? Lauren hesitated. The word suddenly felt heavier than she expected. Us. Greg blinked once. Then he laughed softly. Oh. Lauren's chest tightened slightly. What's funny? Greg shook his head. Lauren. He said her name the way someone might say a word that had suddenly become inconvenient. You can't be serious. The room felt colder. I am serious. Greg took another sip of whiskey. We were just having fun. The sentence landed like a stone in her stomach. Fun? She repeated. Greg shrugged. You were unhappy in your marriage. Lauren stared at him. You knew I was leaving Adrian. He tilted his head slightly. You said that. You encouraged it. Did I? Greg's voice remained calm, too calm. You're a grown woman, he continued. You make your own choices. Lauren felt something sharp twist in her chest. You said we had something real. Greg laughed again, not cruelly, but dismissively. I said we had chemistry. That's not the same thing. Lauren's grip tightened around the glass. You stayed with me. Sometimes. You told me I deserved better. Greg nodded. And you do. Then what is this? She demanded. Greg sighed like someone tired of explaining something obvious. This is 2 adults enjoying each other's company. Lauren's voice dropped. And when that stops? He shrugged. Then it stops. The simplicity of the answer stunned her. Just like that? Greg finished his drink and set the glass on the counter. Lauren, I never asked you to leave your husband. You didn't stop me either. That's not my responsibility. The words echoed in the quiet apartment. Lauren realized something slowly, something terrifying. Greg had never promised her a future. He had only allowed her to imagine one, and she had filled the empty spaces with hope. Later that night, Lauren drove home alone. The city lights blurred through the rain on her windshield. For the first time since Adrian left, the silence in the car felt suffocating. Greg's words repeated in her mind. We were just having fun. Fun. That was all it had been to him. But for Lauren, it had been something else entirely. An escape. A validation. Proof that she was still desirable, still exciting, still capable of living outside the quiet routines of marriage and motherhood. Now the illusion had collapsed, and she was left staring at the consequence. When she walked into the house, Chloe sat at the dining table doing homework. Mia watched television in the living room. Neither girl looked up immediately. Lauren set her keys down slowly. Hi. Chloe glanced at her briefly. Hi. Mia waved without turning away from the screen. Lauren stood in the kitchen, unsure what to say next. The house felt unfamiliar, not because Adrian was gone, but because the warmth he once carried into the rooms had disappeared with him. Finally, Chloe spoke. You are with Greg again. Lauren stiffened. How do you know that? You're always with Greg. Lauren opened the refrigerator, pretending to search for something. That's not true. Chloe closed her textbook. Is he moving in? The question made Lauren turn around sharply. Of course not. Chloe studied her face. Why not? Lauren didn't answer. Because she suddenly realized she didn't know the answer herself. Mia spoke from the couch. Adrian used to make popcorn on movie nights. The simple statement filled the room with an uncomfortable silence. Chloe added quietly. He used to fix the Wi-Fi too. Lauren felt irritation rising. Your lies didn't revolve around Adrian. Chloe looked at her calmly. No. Then she said the sentence Lauren hadn't expected. But the house worked better when he was here. Lauren had no response. Later that night, after both girls went to bed, Lauren sat alone at the kitchen table. The same table where Adrian once drank coffee every morning. The same table where she had told him he wasn't their father. For the first time, she replayed the moment carefully. The look on his face. Not anger, not even shock. Just a quiet understanding. As if he had finally heard something he already suspected. Lauren rubbed her forehead. She had believed Adrian would return. Men always did after arguments. But Adrian hadn't fought. He had simply walked away. And now she understood why. Because somewhere deep down, he had realized she never truly saw him as part of the family. The truth settled heavily over the kitchen. Greg had been an illusion. Adrian had been real. And she had traded the second for the first. Lauren picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over Adrian's contact. For several seconds, she stared at his name. Then she set the phone back down. Because suddenly she understood something painful. Some mistakes couldn't be undone with a message. Some losses only became clear after the person who held everything together was already gone. And Adrian Walker had been holding far more together than she ever realized. 6 months later, Seattle looked different. Summer sunlight stretched longer across the city, reflecting brightly on the calm surface of Lake Union. Cafes opened their windows to the warm air, and sidewalks filled with people enjoying the rare, clear days. Adrian Walker had begun to recognize his life again. Not the life he once had, but the one he had slowly built after leaving it behind. His apartment no longer looked temporary. Books now filled the once empty shelves. A framed photograph of the lake hung above the couch. A guitar he hadn't touched in years leaned against the corner of the living room. Saturday mornings had become his favorite part of the week. He woke early, brewed coffee, and walked down to the waterfront while the city was still quiet. This morning was no different. Adrian stood by the railing, watching sailboats drift slowly across the water. For the first time in a long while, his thoughts felt steady. Not empty, just balanced. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message. Chloe. Science fair today, don't forget. Adrian smiled. Wouldn't miss it, he replied. The middle school gymnasium buzzed with energy that afternoon. Students stood proudly beside poster boards filled with diagrams, experiments, and colorful charts. Parents walked between tables asking questions and taking photos. Adrian entered quietly, scanning the room. Chloe spotted him first. Her face lit up as she waved. Over here. He walked toward her display table. The project involved renewable energy, small wind turbines connected to a miniature generator. Impressive, Adrian said. Chloe grinned. You helped me with the first science fair, I remember. You built a volcano. It exploded. Mia suddenly appeared beside them, holding a bag of chips. You used too much baking soda, she said seriously. Adrian laughed. Lesson learned. The three of them stood together for several minutes, discussing the project and watching the judges move between tables. From across the gym, Lauren Bennett stood near the entrance. She had arrived a few minutes earlier and stopped walking the moment she saw them together. Adrian, Chloe, Mia, laughing, talking, looking comfortable in a way the house had not felt in months. Lauren remained near the wall, unsure whether to approach. Something about the scene felt fragile, not hostile, just distant. Eventually Chloe noticed her. "Mom's here," she said quietly. Adrian nodded. Lauren walked over slowly. "Hi," her voice sounded careful. "Hi," Adrian replied. The conversation that followed was polite, measured, like two people speaking in a language they used to know but hadn't practiced in a long time. "The project looks great," Lauren said to Chloe. "Thanks," Mia tugged on Adrian's sleeve. "Can you come see my art show next week?" Adrian nodded. "Of course." Lauren watched the exchange silently. A quiet realization formed in her mind. Despite everything that had happened, the girl still trusted him, still looked to him with the same warmth they once had when he lived in their house. But now that connection existed outside her control. When the judges finished evaluating the projects, students began packing up their displays. Chloe hugged Adrian quickly. "Thanks for coming. Always." Mia followed with her own hug. Then the girls walked toward the exit. Lauren and Adrian remained behind near the emptying tables. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Lauren said, "They've missed you." Adrian looked around the gym. "I've missed them too." Another silence. Then Lauren asked the question she had been avoiding for months. "Are you happy?" Adrian considered it carefully. "Yes," he said. "Not with triumph, not with bitterness, just honesty." Lauren nodded slowly. "I'm glad." She hesitated. "I didn't understand what I was saying that night." Adrian didn't interrupt. Lauren stared down at the floor. "I thought it was just an argument." Adrian finally spoke. "Sometimes arguments reveal things people have been thinking for years." Lauren exhaled softly. "That's probably true." The noise of families leaving the gym echoed around them. Lauren looked at him again. "You've changed. So have you." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Yes." Another long pause passed. Then Lauren said quietly, "You were a good father to them." The word seemed difficult for her to admit. Adrian nodded once. "Thank you." Lauren looked towards the exit where Chloe and Mia waited outside. "They still talk about you a lot." Adrian didn't answer, because he didn't need to. The truth already existed between them. Finally Lauren said, "I should go." Adrian nodded. "Take care, Lauren." She walked toward the door. Halfway across the gym she paused. For a brief second she looked back. Adrian was helping Chloe fold her poster board. Mia stood beside him explaining something excitedly with wide hand gestures. The scene looked natural, effortless, like a small family moment. Lauren realized something then, something painful. When Adrian had lived in their house, she believed he would always be there, always adjusting, always forgiving, always trying to keep everything together. But now she understood the truth. Adrian had stopped trying, and the moment he did, the family she thought was permanent had quietly disappeared. Later that evening, Adrian sat on his apartment balcony watching the sunset fade across the water. The city light slowly replaced the fading daylight. His phone buzzed again. "Chloe, I got second place." Adrian smiled. "That's amazing." Another message arrived. "You're still coming to my graduation next year, right?" He typed back immediately. "Of course." He set the phone down and leaned back in his chair. The wind carried the faint sound of boats moving across the lake. Adrian thought about everything that had happened during the past year. The argument, the silence, the departure, the slow rebuilding of a life he had nearly forgotten how to live. For a long time he believed family meant staying no matter what. Now he understood something deeper. Family wasn't defined by obligation or by blood. It was defined by presence, by honesty, by the people who chose to remain connected even after everything changed. And sometimes the clearest proof of love was knowing when to stop fighting for someone who had already let go.